Welcome to the Workplace Ninja Summit 2022 podcast, a live recording directly from Lucerne with interesting topics.
So welcome again back at the interview table of the Workplace Ninja Summit 2022. And now on the table, Peter and Michael let's talk about Windows 11, I think. So maybe first you can have a short introduction of yourself, Michael.
Sure. My name's Michael Niehaus. I'm a R&D engineer at Tanium and longtime Windows deployment and manageability person.
So a long time already in the space around Windows and deploying stuff.
Way too many years.
And Peter, what are you doing normal and here?
Whoa, that's like a really large question, actually, Frans. I'm more about modern management in general. So I actually do everything around Endpoint Manager. And that means Windows, but also the other stuff like iOS, Android, maybe even a little bit Mac OS. So
Mac, what's that?
yeah, exactly. it's a device that looks a little bit like that.
Yeah, but then with another operating system, I guess.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the conference so far, are you enjoying the stuff here, Michael?
Yeah, it's definitely been good, especially after I got my sessions done and could relax and become an attendee again. It's been a long time since I've actually managed to spend an entire day just attending sessions.
Yeah.
So that's been good.
And
How is that experience actually? Because you've always been on the other side, basically.
Yeah, I don't know. They did some favors for me scheduling it so that all my sessions were on the first and second day. So my third day is calm.
they have done a good job. Peter, when looking at Windows 11, what is your favorite feature?
Whoa. Whoa, where did that come from? Well, I don't know if I don't really have a specific favorite feature of Windows 11 at this point in time. I think the next release will contain some nice security features. But besides from the UI at this moment, I don't think there is anything special in it compared to Win 10. Don't know. Do you agree on that, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, most of the changes are look and feel. So you get the new start menu, the new taskbar, things like that. And once you adjust to those, which generally doesn't take very long, it then feels very familiar with rounded corners and different fonts and that kind of stuff. But it is still just Windows 10 with the new coat of paint on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the next version that is coming, that is more related to security feature. Is that already in the What's New session that you have done?
I did try to go through what was new in 22H2, which I believe comes out next week. I consider it overall fairly boring because, well, they're not the types of features that I use on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, there's plumbing changes, things going on behind the scenes, but nothing that I'll really see other than just more minor tweaks to the UI to make it a little better overall.
Yeah, and the first version of Windows 11 that came out last year or so, that was more or less a consumer version. Is that true?
It wasn't supposed to be that way. It just turned out that way. That most enterprises looked at it and said, no thanks, we'll stick with Windows 10 for now. Which I think goes back to the comment made in the initial keynote that 50% of organization PCs didn't support the Windows 11 hardware requirements. So organizations generally don't like running two different versions of the OS for any longer than they have to. So they would look at that as the easy answer is keep running Windows 10.
That's indeed also the same discussions we also see at our customers. Because it's exactly what you say, that Win 10, it's all running fine. They have it under control now. And there is no real benefit for a customer to go to Win 11, except for the fact that at some point in time, Win 10 will be discontinued.
Yeah, the countdown's underway, 2025. So probably next year, 2023, becomes the year that people start looking seriously at moving to Windows 11. From my perspective, I would say they probably need to look at it sooner for new PCs, especially with the 12th gen CPUs and the performance cores and the efficiency cores. And Windows 11 is really the only OS that understands that stuff. Windows 10 looks at that and says, hey, CPU cores, let me dispatch random pieces of work to random CPUs. And as a result, the performance suffers.
Yeah, if that is that the problem within Microsoft, they are delivering such a good OS like Windows XP, like Windows 10, like some other, that is hard to get people and organizations move to a newer version.
You did skip a few nice ones, by the way.
Which one?
Vista.
Vista?
Was fantastic.
Yeah, that's the reason. But there are a few good OSs, and when you want to migrate to a newer version, and Vista was not that. Is that a problem? What we see normally in our day job?
As far as skipping versions?
Yeah, skipping. If it's hard to get customers onto a new version until support is ended, for example, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of look at the scenarios as being a little different. Windows Vista and Windows 7 really weren't that different. The biggest difference was the hardware caught up. So Vista was horrible on the PCs that were available at the time, especially laptops.
Yep.
I had some really bad laptops that really didn't run any OS very well, but Vista especially. By the time Windows 7 came along, all the devices were pretty capable, so it was suddenly great, even though behind the scenes, nothing really changed.
Yeah.
Windows 8, that's a completely different story. Windows 8 and the radical UI changes that were made were very unpopular. They tried to address a little of it in 8.1, which helped a little bit, but they truly didn't fix the problems until Windows 10. So 8 wasn't skipped because it was too early for the hardware that was shipped. It was just a bad UI.
Yeah. It's more or less related to different issues. It's not one core issue that stucks when moving to a new version.
And
Yeah.
What you do see often in the market, by the way, is that indeed customers do tend to skip a version for whatever reason, because often they get too soon to each other.
The problem was Windows 10 was supposed to end that.
Yeah, exactly.
That we weren't going to do these new releases, and as a result, you wouldn't skip. You just keep deploying new feature updates as they came out. But Microsoft decided they had to do this marketing moment around Windows 11 to stir up excitement for the OS, and I think it's backfired.
Yeah, because I had really weird stories with customers that indeed the story was around Win 10 was the last version, right?
Yeah.
And now it's like, they did say something like that, but they never formally confirmed it. So there was always a little bit of room for another version of Windows.
Yeah.
And here we go. We have another version.
Yeah. And customers were finally getting the hang of Windows 10 feature updates and deploying them maybe once a year.
Yep.
With the time frames that were given on support timelines, that became doable. And just as soon as you get everyone doing that, then they blow things up again. And
what I saw at customers, the processes were in place to update once a year and so on and so on. So everything was in place to maintain your Windows version in that case. And then it fired up, as you said.
And that was a major advance from previous OSs, where it was 3 to 5 years at best between operating system upgrades inside of an organization.
Yeah.
They were doing it routinely once a year.
One of the other sessions that you gave, Michael, was about the MDM management across workloads.
I was actually there, and I was surprised to see you talk about something else than Windows, Mike.
Yeah, I actually spend a fair amount of time in my new job working on all kinds of different platforms, including Linux. I've been using a lot of Linux even for Windows deployment, and even Windows to Linux OS refresh cycles. Like, there's a box running Windows, they want it to run Linux, let's refresh it.
Really?
So that's been eye-opening. My primary device now is a Mac, so my day-to-day work is done on Mac OS. So it's just the difference in organizations, different development tools, so go with the flow. Actually, before I joined Microsoft, I worked in college for Apple as a student rep and was proud of the fact that I never bought anything from Microsoft. I was the typical Apple fanboy, so going to Microsoft was a bit of a shock to the system.
So now you're actually getting back to your roots.
Yeah, now I'm more neutral when it comes to OS platforms.
But do you
Whatever
already-
platform for the task.
Did you already get used to Mac OS? Because I also personally have a MacBook, but I really have a difficult time getting to, well, really work with it when my daily driver is on a Windows device.
I didn't have problems adjusting to Mac OS. The biggest challenge is that I use Mac OS to RDP into a Hyper-V server, and I always mess up the key combinations for keyboard shortcuts.
That's indeed my problem also.
I think I finally got it down to remember which key combination I need to do, but that was the hardest part.
Yeah.
Constantly pushing which one's the control, which one's the alt, which one's the Windows.
If we look at the MDM technology to manage devices like Windows, like other stuff, is the MDM management features that we have nowadays, is that completely the future, or do you see other things coming up in that space to manage devices?
I think generally it's the future. The challenge is that a lot of platforms don't necessarily put the necessary investment into making it a fully featured in-box MDM agent that can do everything that you need. So now every MDM vendor needs to add their own stuff on top of that to extend it.
Yeah.
Apple is really trying to slowly claw back control of their OS by taking things away, where Windows is kind of on the opposite side of saying, let's just throw every GPO policy we have at MDM, and you can manage 15,000 policies if you want to. There's just different styles and different priorities, but they are all still moving toward that mobile device management vision of the future.
You talked about, I think it was Android and iOS.
Mainly about Android. So yeah, I did one session about Tunnel, so that was basically a combination. But it was fun to see actually that nobody is using it yet. That being said, the Android Enterprise session, it was actually Android device management in general. It's still surprising to see how serious people take the management of the desktop and laptop devices within the org, but still see their mobile device as something like, yeah, we have to do something with it, but we actually don't know what. So it's been, even though there is also corporate data on those devices, so it should be more like a real citizen, just like your laptop or desktop. And that's also the story that I try to tell, but both Apple and Android are not really working with that story because they both handle it totally different, especially if you look at Android devices.
Yeah.
At this moment, we're at 8 different ways of managing apps and or devices for Android, so it's like a fantastic platform.
Way too many four-letter acronyms that no one can remember.
True, yeah. Luckily, I'm one of the persons that can remember them, so that's good if you're in a consultancy company. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. And did you touch that also, Michael, in the MDM session? Android, iOS, Windows?
Yeah, it was kind of compare and contrast across macOS, iOS, Android, and Windows. Windows is probably the most static of the platforms. That they built a platform for MDM management in Windows 8.0, 8.1, Windows Phone 8, around that time frame, and it really hasn't changed since then. Whereas Android keeps adding more and more modes of managing the device, and even Apple comes through and says, well, we're going to move to declarative management rather than command and response, command and response. Let's just tell the device, here's the configuration we want, and have the device notify the MDM service if there's anything that goes out of whack.
Yeah. So if we look at the future, Windows 11 is coming more and more to business from a business perspective. It's coming more, maybe in 2003, 2004, 24, probably. If support will end for Windows 10, then probably it get higher and higher. There will be lots of investment in Windows 11, I think. But what do you expect from that?
More of the status quo. I mean, I don't see that the Windows 10 versus Windows 11 process really changes anything. You will still have customers who are making the move from on-prem to cloud and from Active Directory to Azure AD and those sorts of things. So that continues whether or not you're running Windows 10 or Windows 11. So you don't really need to get to 11 to make progress. You can continue to do that on 10.
It doesn't matter in that case.
Yeah, I do wonder what the influence will be of something like Cloud PC, like Windows 365, what that will bring to the table.
Yeah, I'm somewhat a skeptic just because I've seen organizations that are too cheap. They look at the price of that Cloud PC, the monthly cost, and compare it against a cheap laptop and say, I'd rather buy cheap laptops for all my people and throw them away after 3 years. Even though the experience might be better on the Cloud PC than it is on that cheap laptop, they don't look at it that way. They just see dollar signs.
Let's see what the future brings.
We'll see.
Thanks, guys. And have a nice conference so far. Maybe in the next hour when we're finishing up and then moving back to our homes. But maybe see you next time, and thanks for now.